This episode of the All Automotive Podcast is brought to you by our friends at GeForce Automotive. GeForce Automotive is a certified service center through Auto Value. Want to make an appointment? Go to their website at www.geforceautomotive.net. Click on the banner that says Make an Appointment and make your appointment today. And now, the next episode of the All Automotive Podcast. All right, welcome back to another episode of All Automotive. I'm your host, Matt Clawson, and today we're talking about restoration, car restoration. Recently bought a C10 Chevy pickup, and it spawned some information in my head to say, hey, let's talk about this today. So who better to talk about restoring a car than, I guess, my brother. My brother Jeff is with us today. We're talking to him over the telephone about restoring cars. He's restored several cars throughout his life, and we're going to talk to him. And welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hey, thanks. I'm glad to be here, Matt. This is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So I was telling you, I actually texted you and told you that we bought this truck, and we've been looking for a Chevy C10 truck for almost a year now, and we had one. We went to an auction, and the guy, it just got bid up way too high for us, and it was all original, straight six, shifts on the tree, 3 on the tree. It was really nice truck, and it was a 69, I believe. Anyway, so over the last couple of months, me and my wife have been looking really hard to find a truck, and we found one a couple weeks ago, and we ended up buying it, and it's a 1968 Stepside. It's gold in color, and it's Danny calls it Delilah already. She's put a name on it, so
there you go.
That's important. So we're here talking with my brother, and he texted me, or he actually called because I texted him to show him the pictures of it, and he wanted to just talk to me immediately. And so I thought this would be a good episode to talk about restoring a car if you were kind of like the average Joe. So welcome to the show, Jeff. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and what kind of cars you've restored.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not a professional car restorer. My career is as a banker and a finance guy. Right now, I work at a small nonprofit business advisory where we work with disadvantaged businesses to try to help them grow. So
Awesome.
This whole restoration thing is a whole side thing. When we were kids, Matt and I were taking apart the lawnmower, and we had motorcycles and go-karts and mini bikes and all that stuff. And I got to get this in here that, when we were kids, we were so into this. My dad used to lock our dad used to lock the toolbox so we wouldn't take stuff apart.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah. And so, but we learned from all that stuff. And I can recall doing things like rebuilding the engine on a Honda, XR70 when I was, in middle school. So we were doing things like this for a long time. As far as car restoration, we counted them before we came on the show, right? And there's 5, that are cars that I brought back from the dead.
We had that conversation before, yeah.
Right, and there are 3 of those that are probably full restorations, or that I would call full restoration, and a couple of them that were various levels of being fixed or whatever, but still brought back.
Yeah, you had the 1954 Chevy in high school. That's right.
That was my high school car. I bought it before I had a driver's license. Then that one I had for a while, and I had a 65 Chevrolet in high school and in college.
The Impala. Yep.
Then an 82 Camaro.
I forgot about that car.
Yeah, that car ended up, that was in the latter part of college, and, after I got out. And then, family and everything, and it was a while. And then I think it was in 2004, I bought a 76 Gremlin in pieces and, resurrected that. And then along the way, actually, before that, in like 98, I bought the Charger, and the Charger was a lifelong project. I still own that car, and that was a full nut and bolt, take apart everything, restoration. So there you go. That's the list.
All right, so let's talk about that Charger. I mean, when you went to buy that, what actually was your mindset? I mean, I know what my mindset was is I know I can do it, or I know people that can do it. I mean, I think I'm going to do kind of the same process as maybe a lot of people will do, is do a lot of the work myself and maybe have some of the paint and body work done by a body and paint professional. But yeah, talk a little bit about what your mindset was when you bought that car.
Well, yeah. What happened? Like I said, I was into cars. It was one of those things. I wanted to get back into it. It had been a long time since I had worked on a car, and so I started going to the car shows and was looking for things. And I tried to buy a Duster, and the guy wouldn't. I couldn't buy it. And I tried to buy a Nova, and I couldn't either get the money or make it happen or whatever. And then I saw a picture of the 71 Charger in a magazine. I thought, man, I got to have one of those. And it just was luck. One of the next shows we went to, there's this guy there with this running, driving, Charger, which is the exact model that I wanted. And it looked, it was pretty rough. And honestly, I don't know if I knew what I was getting myself into with it. Like,
right.
I saw a running, driving car, and I didn't know, and I wanted that car so bad, I overlooked a lot of stuff, right? So I got it home, and once you start, digging into it a little bit, you're like, well, this might be maybe a little bit more, work than I thought it was. But my mindset is I like to do these things. I like to have, something to occupy my mind. It's not work. It's not family. It's not other things where I work by myself a lot. So that I think, and, whatever. So my mindset was, this is a cool car, and it's a running, driving, mostly complete car. And I'm just, at the beginning, and we can talk about the snowball effect later if you want to, but at the beginning,
right.
I was thinking, needs a paint job, touch up the interior a little bit, and, get some different wheels and put some headers on it, and it'll be great. It'll be fine. But of course, as I say, it kind of snowballed a little bit, as time went by. But that was my mindset at the beginning, was I want to have something fun to go to car shows with,
right.
do a burnout in front of the house and just have fun with it, that kind of thing. So,
well, and that's not a car that everybody has. A 71 Charger. You go to a car show, you're probably one of the only people that have the long front end Dodge Charger there.
Yeah, they aren't as common, and certainly when I bought it in '98, there was not a huge, aftermarket following for the 71 specific stuff. When I bought that car, Charger World was all about the 68s and 69s and the 70s, and then probably the next in line would have been the early ones, the 65, 66, and then maybe the 70s, because the 70s, remember when we were kids, 70s cars weren't muscle cars, they were
right.
too new.
They were only 10 years old.
Right, they were too new.
We'll date ourselves right away. They were only 10 years
yeah.
old in 1980.
Yeah, that's
80s,
right.
let's say. Because I was in my 10th digits in the 80s.
That's right.
So I turned
That's
13 in 83, so that'll tell you
there you go.
I am. Anyway, so talk about how the restoration process kind of takes on a life of its own.
Well, that's what I was referring to before, is that snowball effect, right? Like you start fixing something and you're looking at it and you're like, well, this part next to that part is rusty, so I'm going to need to fix that part too. Or, you go in to do the transmission and you realize, oh, if I'm going to do a street strip rebuild on this transmission, the rear end gear is only, 273, and so those aren't going to work together. So I need to do the rear end too. And then at some point you say, you're going to car shows along the way and you see these beautifully restored vehicles. And you're like, I think I really want that for my car. And then, so after probably 18 months of having my car, I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, that means I have to blow this thing fully apart just based on the condition that it's in. And so that's what I started doing, and it actually took me probably another 18 months to take the car all the way apart.
Wow.
Just with family and whatever else. But I would try
right.
to.
I mean, we have 9 to 5 jobs, or 8 to
Right.
5:30 job.
That's right. So you just say, okay, this weekend I'm getting the motor out, and that would be your,
That's
the
the
goal
goal.
for the weekend.
Right.
So
Now the Dodge Charger, and then we'll tell everybody, the 69 Dodge Charger, everybody knows that one. That's the one that was the Dukes of Hazzard, the General Lee. So when I'm saying the long nose Charger, it's the one after those, which, it's kind of unique itself too. And, when we talk about restoration, there's a couple of different things as far as restoration. And there's customization where you redo a car, but you customize it. But there's a lot of guys out there, and I think you in particular, that do restoration to bring it back to what it was like in 1971, sitting on that Dodge dealership's showroom.
well, the Mopar wing of the hobby is sort of fanatical in terms of they can be anyway, in terms of originality and numbers matching, because Mopars are unique or somewhat unique in that, you can tell what engine came with what car because the VIN is on the engine. Same with the transmission and the rear end. You can establish that a vehicle, these parts came with this vehicle, so you have the ability to do that. Something that is not as easy to do on other manufacturers' cars. But yeah, my goal was to make it like it was in '70, although I didn't restore my car 100% to the way exactly the way it came, but I did restore it with period parts and, with a paint job that came on that car and with the vinyl top that was an option that year. So it's all pieces and parts that, were available on that car that year. So it's just something that was my preference, is that I wanted it to look like, you were going, because that's the whole fun of the thing, is hopping in it and it's like I'm going back to high school. That's the fun for me. So
yeah, and that's just the thing too, is you want to get to the point where you either want to get it to that point where it's like it was factory and everything's original, but with the availability of some of the parts and stuff, that makes it kind of difficult. Talk about some of the challenges that you had with gaining some of those parts, and one that kind of sticks out in particular, maybe.
yeah, so the that car did not have a huge, aftermarket following when I bought it in 1998.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That was sort of it wasn't a super popular car. You could get a lot of things for the 68, 69, 70 Chargers, the as you point, the general, quote unquote, General Lee shaped Chargers. You could get a lot of stuff for that. And there were other, Barracudas and Cudas and Challengers, but the 71, 74 Charger was not that well followed. So it was a lot of, eBay and digging through boxes and swap meets. And, I sourced a lot of stuff that way.
Right.
Now it's different. There's a lot more aftermarket support for just about everything out there.
Yeah. I mean, even when you bought it in 1998, I think back and you're like, okay, so if you think about it, we had Windows 98 and now we have Windows 11. So, you think about the difference in the availability or our ability to find a part. So was there any kind of part that you were looking for this thing that was particularly hard to procure?
There were a couple, but I'll tell you a quick story that sticks out in my mind is when I was at a swap meet and I was looking for when I got to my car, the valance on the front and was dented and the blinker lenses were out of it, were cracked and were not, they weren't going back on the car. Let's put it that way. And so I was looking around at swap meets and there were companies that reproduced them. And I was talking to people, guys at these booths and stuff. And they're like, well, we don't do the 71 yet or whatever. So I actually almost tried to start a business around making those lenses. And somewhere around in this house, I actually have the prototypes of the lenses that I made because I was at a swap meet and I saw a set of new old stock 71 blinker lenses and they wanted like $200 each. and I'm a guy
Right,
with two
because
little
nobody's
kids.
got them.
I'm a guy with two little kids, and like I can't do $200 each for a blinker lens. So that those are some of the challenges. Now you could probably go into year one and find a blinker lens for $60
Right.
or
So
something.
I mean,
but,
yeah, there's National Parts Depot. We've got year one, and you just poke in what vehicle you want, and
right.
And gosh, I was on the internet floating around a couple of different websites for the C10 Chevy truck, and I'm pretty sure you could build the entire truck out of that catalog or out of the website. They pretty much put their catalog on the internet, and you can go through and get fenders and box sides and fender flares and doors and skins, and it's just unbelievable how much what type of stuff they actually make. And even today, when I think about suspension components and stuff, I bet you could get on a suspension component website and find a whole new front end for your 71 Charger.
And yeah, exactly. Even back when I was doing that work, I was able to go out to a company and buy all new bushings, hardware, ball joint ends, spindle bushings, all that stuff was available, back then. And it was, and it's only getting better now. You can buy the whole K member and all of these things, all aftermarket, tubular, whatever you want to do. It's available. And, you talk about the availability of parts for your truck. I know they're as well as I, like the Camaros and the 57 Chevy, they sell whole bodies. Mustangs, like the early Mustangs, they sell entire bodies in metal that you can purchase and start you could build the whole car out of a book. So
yeah, and it's crazy how much the things have gone, our way. I like to say, as far as
it's become a lot easier. That's for sure.
Because I think back to high school, and I had that '69 Chevelle, and there was two sources, and I had catalogs that I got stuff out of for that car, and I just think about the difference in the availability of getting stuff, and it's difficult now because of the things that have gone on in the last couple of years. However, the availability of the stuff and being able to find stuff and not have to necessarily go to a swap meet and find turn signal lenses for a 71 Charger. So that being said, and you've worked on this car for a really long time, and it's done. And talk about a time where you were doing something on this car when it went awry. You totally either screwed something up or you failed. and that happens.
Yeah, with the Charger, I was very, deliberate, with a lot of things. I tried to make sure that I didn't make any of those errors. So it's kind of hard I'm trying to think of something with the Charger, but I can tell you a story about a previous, car before that, that 65 Chevy that I had in high school, where I bought that car in pieces. And then we were rebuilding the engine, and that was a big block Chevy 396.
Oh yeah, I remember.
And
that.
we had done all this work, and we put it together, and I was so excited. We started it up, and it had a rod knock, right away. Right away, it had a rod knock, and so we're like, "What did we do wrong?" Because we went through every. Yeah, exactly. Oh no, a rod knock. Well, I don't know what had happened or how, during the assembly when we were, whatever we were doing, we weren't doing it right. Half of the rod bearing didn't get put in the rod, and it was somehow, laying in it fell out and was in the block, and I didn't notice, and then put the rest of the engine together. And when we took it apart, that half of the bearing was sitting in the oil pan. So,
oh wow,
as you can imagine,
I guess I'd never heard that story.
Yeah, that was a big. As you can imagine, that was a big setback and a big disappointment.
Where did you put that engine together? I remember that car, and I'm pretty sure I drove it a couple of times.
Yeah. That that first time we put it together was at the house.
Okay.
And then the second time was through the auto mechanics program up at the high school.
Oh, okay. Right.
So we had to grind the crank and do the rods and all that stuff. And once I had messed it all up, so.
Right. So, and that's a particularly frustrating instance where the entire engine has to come back out, and a big block Chevy a big block Chevy is not the lightest thing in the world. And if I remember right, we made a engine stand specifically for it that had some support.
Right.
Because I remember we had a shop teacher, and I had several of his classes, and anyway, I was building an engine stand in his metals class, and he come out and asked me, he said, "Clawson, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to do this engine stand because I pulled this out of the projects thing." And he's like, "Oh, okay, well, what are you going to put on that?" And he's poking me. And I said, "Well, I have this 69 Chevelle that I have to redo the big block. I had a 396 in that car." And he goes, "You're going to need to put braces from that tube down to the legs because it's not going to hold it." So even if you weld this 4-inch, 2-inch square tubing together, and I did it really well, and I think somebody still has that engine.
I have that.
You have that engine stand.
Yep.
And so we ended up putting supports on there or building it robust enough so that it would hold that particular engine. But I guess I never heard that story about the rod bearing. It's like, and I was particularly particular when I put my engine in my Monte Carlo SS. When I went through and did all that, I plastic gauged everything, and that's a tool that tells you the clearance of the bearings when you turn it over and stuff like that. So I was particularly meticulous with all of that stuff. And if you've done any kind of engine rebuild or engine work, and that's something that you really need to kind of pay attention to. But hey, that stuff, it does happen. You're pounding the piston down in the cylinder bore, and that kind of probably the upper one probably just kind of went bloop. So yeah, that's not a very good deal. Okay, so a fail that didn't go very well, but ultimately that car ran really well, and you ended up selling that car and moving on from that. So now that I've bought this SC10 truck, I've come to the realization that there are so many resources out there to help me get this truck to where I kind of want it, whether I keep it all original or if I want to customize it, lower it. There's front end parts. There's a whole front end system that you can change that over so it drives like a new truck. So Jeff, talk about some of the things, some of the resources that you use, maybe how your shop is set up, and tell us some of the things that you go through or you use to get your restoration projects moving along.
Yeah. So, well, that's a great question too, because it's changed over time, right? Like, when I was first starting down the path, we've already talked about it once, the internet wasn't such a great resource. There were some like message boards and things like that out there, but it wasn't a great resource. Now the internet is invaluable to anybody that's trying to do any of this stuff because of the proliferation of all these channels that are doing, repair work. Now I will caution that you need to pick the channel that you're going to listen to pretty carefully, because there's a lot of junk on YouTube as well. And a lot of the videos are cut so much so that they can be under 12 minutes long, because that's the optimal length of a YouTube video, that you don't really get anything out of them. You don't get a lot of the detail.
Yeah, and YouTube is really good if you know what you're looking for. If you there's thousands of stuff out there, but you got to kind of take some of the good with the bad. And unfortunately, you will run into those. What we're going to do is, we're going to take this all apart, and there's some pretty cool stuff out there though, too. These guys are out there rebuilding LS engines, and, they're doing crazy things, and there's some good content there. But yeah, continue on with what your train of thought there was.
So it's like, as you point out, you need to dig through and separate out the good from the bad, and that sometimes is a little more difficult than it might otherwise be. But there are also all kinds of make specific, message boards and club online, groups that you can belong to. And I hesitate to refer people to Facebook because I'm not a huge fan of the Facebook, but there are groups on Facebook that you can post questions in. I'm in a 71 to 74, Dodge Charger, or B-body, Mopar B-body group, and you can ask questions,
right?
Show people things that you did.
And again, that's just like with YouTube, Facebook pages, and I'm on a couple of Monte Carlo SS pages, and there's some good content and there's some bad content, and I'm a particular 80s G-body GM car, whether it's a Grand National, Monte Carlo SS, or the Grand Prix. I'm on a couple of those that's all the G-bodies together, and there's some pretty cool people in that, but it's Facebook, and you do get your share of under the bridge kind of people.
Yeah, under the bridge. That's a great way to describe it, brother. That's a great way to describe it. So so there are all those online sources that you could go to. There, the next place that I would refer somebody is when you're trying to do a particular project. Like right now, I have a 74 Jeep out in the shop, and we're doing a conversion from the Jeep engine to a small block Chevrolet, right? So we're trying to figure out how to mate the Jeep transmission to the Chevy motor. And long story short,
interesting.
There are companies out there doing, making adapter kits. So you get on the line with their tech folks and you talk through the situation with that company's tech folks, because you're going to spend $1,000 with them for all these parts. They're more than happy to talk you through kind of, here's what you might run into, here's what you look out for, those sorts of things. The same thing with places like Summit. They all have tech lines. Obviously, you want to, make sure that you're vetting that, advice that you're getting, but those are all resources that you can reach out to.
And Summit Racing's in your backyard, isn't it?
Yeah, Summit Racing's in Talmadge, Ohio, which is about 35 or 40 minutes from my house. So yeah, we're lucky that way. And then I guess the next thing that I would say as far as getting information for you is going to car shows, finding people that have a car like yours or a similar car. Like I'm a Mopar guy, so I could talk to 60s and 70s Mopar guys and get a lot of tips and tricks. I guarantee you that anybody that's restored a car is willing to talk to you ad nauseum about
hours.
The process they went through in order to do it. We love to talk about what we did. So you will get a lot of information that way, and you might even make a friend, and you might even get help that guy, or he'll help you. So
yeah, and there's those guys out there too. You go to these car shows, and especially here, I live in Michigan, and it's the motor. I live close to the Motor City. If you held your hand up and stuck your finger right in the middle of your hand, right below your thumb muscle, that's where I live, in mid-Michigan. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to find somebody that knows something about the car that you're working on. They have one. I'm walking by and I see this guy with a nice looking 87 Grand National, and he's got the hood up, and I'm looking at it, and I crawl underneath of it, and I poke my head up, and I kind of looked, and he's smiling at me, and I said, well, is this an 86 or an 87? And he's like, it's an 87. I said, oh, okay. So everything's original, even the turbo and everything. He's like, yep. And that's the year that car was the fastest American production car made. So yeah. It was kind of interesting talking to him, because it's the Buick version of the Monte Carlo SS. And I happen to like the way the exhaust exits on that one compared to how it did on the Monte Carlo. And I thought, man, that would be kind of a cool, kind of different kind of look for the Monte Carlo SS. So I stuck my head under there just to see how it kind of came out and did that stuff. And then that car's got an electric fan, and then the Monte Carlo that I'm building has got a transplanted 96 Chevy Camaro LT1, and I was trying to figure out how to do the fan, and so I was looking to see if I could find a cooling fan motor that mounted up to the radiator support for a Grand National. And I've got some Grand National stuff on my car because it's fuel injected, and those were too. So I had some some stuff as far as that goes. But yeah, you talk about going to these car shows and talking to these people. You see the car that you like, or you see, most of the time these guys are willing to talk to you, aren't they?
They are willing to, and you're hitting on something else that I was close to, but hadn't brought up, was that you can look at the actual car and see what it looks like, finished. And
Right.
most guys are not going to have any problem with you pulling your phone out and snapping a picture, particularly after you've told him what a good job he's done with the restoration and
Right.
stroke his ego a little bit. He's going to let you take a picture, whatever you want to take a picture of, maybe except the VIN plate. But point being is that you can get an example, like, and you can ask the guy, did you modify this? Or, is this back to original? So you have an idea of what you want your end product to be. You can get some examples that way, real world examples, not just looking on pictures or, videos.
Yeah.
So.
And it's a particularly cool story maybe of how that came about. And so I was, again, I was go back to my story about this Grand National. It was like, and that was, that's one of my all-time favorite cars, really. And I was kind of poking around, and I was just, the interior and stuff was kind of looked really correct. And, so I had asked him a bunch of questions. I'm like, no, this is all original, right? Oh yeah, this is all original. This isn't, this car never seen snow or anything like that. And I've had it since it was, and this particular person bought that car brand new. So, and he was the only owner of it. So, and he was obviously quite proud of it. But, again, when you're looking through these car shows, and, I particularly have been going up to these guys with the C10 trucks. And so now I'm picking up on all these little differences in the C10 trucks that, now the 67s and 68s had metal grills, and now the 69s and 70s and 71s and 72s had plastic grills, but they were all different. And the 67s didn't have marker lights on the sides. And, so you're picking up all these things that I didn't otherwise know. So going back to rebuilding it and keeping it correct and original, this particular C10 that I bought is a straight six. It's a 250 inline six. And immediately that spawned a conversation with us as far as what to do with that.
Right.
And I could be like everybody else and pull it out and put a LS engine,
LS swap it.
A 6-liter LS engine in it and make it crazy.
And a sniper and have it be all, resto mod or whatever they call it now.
Right. But part of me said, this is pretty cool that it's a straight six. And it just runs really good. And, after I got it home, we trailered it home from Indiana, and that was kind of a fun trip. It had snowed that morning really bad around here. There was 4 inches, and the guy that helped me came over in the morning, and I was like, we got to I-94 and it hadn't been plowed. And I'm just like, no, why don't we wait until about noon? The snow's supposed to stop any minute now. And it had snowed all night, and it snowed 4 inches. And I didn't realize that it was going to snow that much. And me and my wife had gone down there the day before to, purchase the thing. We told the guy, well, maybe it's going to be next weekend, but then this guy was available the next day. So anyway, it's got the original seat, the original steering wheel. And this is really kind of tripping my trigger to make this truck a kind of an original piece. I don't know that this is something that I want to soup up, let's say, and make it fast and ugly and, a 10-second quarter-mile thing.
Yeah, I think now you're touching on something that is near to my heart as well when it comes to restorations, is making modifications that are reversible. You can go in there and you could change, your intake manifold and your exhaust manifold, but you put a header on it or put an aluminum intake on it. But that doesn't mean you can't put the original part back on the vehicle if for some reason you wanted to go back to fully original. You're not modifying it in such a way that you're not cutting into the body, or you're not putting cutting a hole in the roof, or you're not doing things that are much harder to reverse. You're not putting in tubular A-arms and all this crazy suspension and cutting the frame and Z-ing the frame so you could be lower, and airbags and all this stuff that are hard to reverse. You're doing things that are reversible, and that maintains the originality and the DNA of the vehicle a lot better. And to me, one of those things that is you have to think about because some people think about restoration in different ways than other people, right? So it's how you want to look at it. Like, yeah, it's not original, but it could be if I wanted it to be. So
right, and when I originally walked up and looked at this truck, I was just like, wow, there's a lot of original stuff on this truck. And then, he raised the hood, he started it up, and I was looking on the inside, and I bent down and I was looking at the wheels, and it's got the original hubcaps on it. So it was kind of cool, and it's missing one. So there's going to be something that I'm going to have to look for, maybe, and then I really didn't want this thing to be too crazy. Like I was talking before, Danny has mentioned several times that she wants to drive it and wants to be the one taking it to car shows. So it's got to be useful for her too. So that's where we were talking about, hey, keep this in there, but, put fuel injection on it and make, so we were immediately looking for aftermarket intakes, and we were looking for Holley fuel injection. So I located an aftermarket intake for it, and it's going to fit a Holley Sniper EFI system on it, which, mechanically is some of the things that I can do. It's going to have an oxygen sensor and a computer, and I'll be able to tune it a little bit so that it runs really good. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that I think is sparking my interest right now is to soup up what's there and maybe make that kind of fancy. And so when people come walking by it, they'll look at it twice and go, is that, that's fuel injected. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Well, we all, there's so many different ways to do it these days, and there's a lot of popularity around a lot of particular swaps. And I think it's sometimes the less you do can be more, right?
Yeah.
Like, particularly in this situation with your truck, and that you're going to go to a car show, and odds are if you see a C10, it is not going to be a long step side 6-cylinder on the tree. It'll be modified. It'll be modified in some way, and so you're going to have a unique vehicle that's going to be an attention getter because it's still the way that it was built. So,
yeah, and that's one of the things I was looking at too when I got it home. After I got it home and got it in the barn, I was poking around. The horn didn't work, so I was poking around looking to see why that didn't work, and it's got a CB radio in it. And I'm thinking, why does this thing why does it have a CB radio in it? And then I'm looking at the roof line, and it really looks like to me that this thing had a factory installed CB radio antenna in the roof. So now my curiosity was really piqued, and I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe this thing was like a municipality truck, to where it's a long box. It's got this heavy duty rear bumper that's obviously needs to be redone. But it had a hitch on it. It's shifts on the floor, and it has this CB antenna. It's not one of those magnetic ones that sticks to the roof. I mean, this is molded right into the roof. It's really interesting. So
you're probably right. It could have been a municipal truck or like a fire truck, or who knows.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. I'm going to try and do some digging on it and see what I think. But hey, I appreciate you coming on the show today, and telling us what's going on with how you see and how you did your restorations, and hopefully this helps somebody that's listening have a better idea of what they're doing when they're restoring their car.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. It's always good to talk to you, of course, you're my brother, right? But right. I appreciate the chance to talk to my brother about cars. Hell, I'll talk to anybody about cars, but I appreciate the chance. This was a lot of fun, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, brother.
All right, man. Well, it was good talking to you. And This wraps up this episode of All Automotive, and I appreciate everybody listening. Again, I'm your host, Matt Clawson. Thanks for listening to All Automotive.